front door slammed against the wall, shaking the framed photos on the shelf. I paused, setting down the basket of neatly folded clothes as Daniel's voice roared through the house. His boots thumped heavily on the oak floors, each step carrying a fury that felt out of place in my peaceful home. "Mom, what did you do?" he bellowed. His face was flushed, hazel eyes blazing like they did when he was a teenager caught in a tempest of anger. "Sarah just called me, sobbing. You changed the pin on your card." She was humiliated at the market, standing there with the cart full of groceries she couldn't buy. People were staring. I stood in the living room doorway, steadying myself. "Daniel, it's my card. My money. I'm not required to let anyone use it freely." He threw his hands up. "We're family. You can't just cut us off." Sarah was getting essentials, food, supplies. "You made her look foolish." His words stung, not for their meaning, but for the disdain in his tone. "For 40 years, I'd raised him, sacrificed for him, poured my life into his. Now he stood before me, fists balled, as if I were a stranger hoarding what he thought was his due." I took a slow breath, keeping my voice calm. "Daniel, lower your voice. We're adults. If you need help, we can discuss it. But my card isn't a family resource." His jaw tightened, and he stepped closer, close enough for me to notice the sweat on his brow. For the first time, a flicker of fear knotted my chest. Not fear of physical harm, but of the chasm that had opened between us. What enough to make my only son feel like a stranger? The laundry basket sat untouched in the hall. Shirts and towels no longer mattered. A fight that started in a checkout line had taken root in my home, and it was only the beginning. I steadied myself, though my legs felt unsteady, and met his gaze. "Daniel, do you remember how I worked double shifts at St. Joseph's after your father died? I took every overtime hour to keep you in college. I paid your tuition when scholarships fell short. I gave you the deposit for your apartment when you wanted independence." He crossed his arms, unmoved. "That's what parents do. You act like it was a favor. Mothers are supposed to sacrifice." The words cut deeper than any insult. "Supposed to," as if years of exhaustion, skipped dinners, and aching bones were just a clause in a contract I'd signed by becoming his mother. My heart ached with memories of those dawn returns, slipping off my shoes to avoid waking him, believing every sacrifice built his future. "Daniel," I said quietly, "I did it because I loved you, because I wanted the life your father and I dreamed for you." He shook his head. "Then why turn on us now? Sarah's family. Her needs are our needs. You've always been generous. Why stop?" I searched his face for the boy I'd raised, but saw only a man who viewed me as a lock safe, not a mother. His voice grew sharper, slicing through the air. I remembered the first night Daniel brought Sarah to dinner. He was beaming, a spark in his eyes I hadn't seen since his university days. Sarah entered with effortless grace, her makeup flawless, her smile warm. She carried herself as if every space belonged to her. I served my lasagna, Daniel's favorite, and Sarah complimented it extravagantly, claiming it was the best she'd ever had. Her charm felt genuine, and I let myself imagine her as the daughter I'd never had. The request started small. "Eleanor, we're tied this month," Sarah would say, her tone soft and apologetic. "Could you spot us $150? We'll pay you back by Friday." Friday came, but the money didn't. $150 became $400, then $700, each excuse polished with sincerity. When Sarah asked to borrow my card for medicine for her sister, I handed it over. That night, my bank statement showed a pharmacy charge, but also $300 at a boutique on River Street, and a dinner at a high-end bistro. I stared at the screen, torn between anger and disbelief. I didn't confront her. I buried the evidence in silence. telling myself it was a mistake, that she was young, that Daniel didn't know. The pattern repeated emergencies paired with charges for luxuries, not necessities. My silence became a cage, a frail attempt to keep peace that only deepened the cracks. By the time I saw the danger of my restraint, it had become their expectation. After a call from the bank about a blocked transaction, I went to the safe in my bedroom. Among the deeds, policies, and James's will, I found a folded paper beneath my passport. My breath caught as I opened it. A photocopy of my credit card, front and back, with the security code in Sarah's neat handwriting, labeled for emergencies. My hand shook. Sarah hadn't just borrowed my card, she crafted a key to my savings. When I showed Daniel, his response cut deeper than the discovery. "Mom, you're overreacting." Sarah wouldn't do that. I held up the paper. Her handwriting's right here. "Daniel." He barely glanced at it. "You're getting paranoid. You've been forgetful lately. Maybe you're not tracking what you give." U.S. The words hit like a slap. Paranoid. Forgetful. He wasn't just defending her, he was questioning my mind, my competence. "Daniel," I said softly, "I know what I've seen. I know what I've lived." He shook his head, pity mixed with irritation. "Maybe someone else should handle your finances in that moment." I understood. My son saw me as a barrier to Sarah's desires, not as the mother who'd given him everything. 2 days later, they returned, standing on my porch with practiced smiles, as if the argument had never happened. They spoke gently, their voices smooth as syrup. "Mom," Daniel began, sitting in the recliner, "we've been thinking. Let's set up a system, no more misunderstandings, no more fights." Sarah leaned forward, her hands folded like she was offering a gift. "Exactly. If you gave us, say, $1,200 a month, we'd know what to expect. You wouldn't feel bothered, and we wouldn't feel ashamed." Her logic was slick, but I heard the entitlement. $1,200 was most of my social security. I shook my head. "No, I can't, and I won't." Daniel's face hardened. "You're being selfish. Sarah and I are building a life, and you're making it harder. If you can't handle your money, maybe a court should decide if you're capable." I froze. "What are you saying?" He didn't waver. "Guardianship. If you're not competent, the law lets families step in. It's to protect you, the son I'd raised, nursed through sickness, cheered through milestones, was threatening to take the independence I've fought for my whole life." My voice shook, but I held it firm. "Get out of my house." They left quietly, but the silence they left behind was heavier than any shout. And I knew I couldn't face this alone. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cold mug of chamomile. Guardianship echoed in my mind, heavy enough to crush me. I'd faced sleepless nights before when James was ill, when Daniel was young, but this was different. This was a fight I couldn't win alone. The next morning, I knocked on Ruth Carter's door. She'd lived across the street for 12 years. A retired librarian with a keen mind and a steady presence. One look at my face, and she said, "Come in." "Eleanor, I spilled everything," the card, Sarah's handwritten copy, the guardianship threat. Ruth listened, her face tightening. When I finished, she leaned back. "Eleanor, I've seen Sarah's charm at your dinners. Her sharp glances when she thought no one was looking. You're not imagining this. She's been manipulating Daniel, and now they're targeting you." Her certainty anchored me. "What do I do?" I whispered. "You fight," Ruth said firmly. "And you don't fight alone. I know a lawyer, Thomas Reed, downtown. He handles cases like this. You need him." A week later, I sat in Thomas's office, surrounded by legal bugs. He asked precise questions, requested my bank records, and soon delivered a grim truth. $22,000 drained from my savings, $12,000 in credit card debt in my name accounts I'd never opened. The numbers were stark. My silence had been weaponized, and the evidence lay bare on Thomas's desk. At the Chatham County Courthouse, Ruth came with me. The building's stone walls felt as heavy as a humid savanna air. My hands trembled, clutching Thomas's file, though he carried his own stack of proof. Facing Daniel in that room nearly undid me. Inside, Daniel and Sarah sat with their lawyer, murmuring urgently. Sarah's gaze met mine briefly, cold and composed, before she looked away. Daniel never looked up. Their lawyer painted me as confused, erratic, unable to manage my finances. Daniel took the stand, voice heavy with rehearsed grief. She's not the mother I knew. She forgets things, accuses us of stealing. We just want to help. Sarah nodded, dabbing her eyes. Thomas stood calmly, presenting bank records of charges I couldn't have made. 3 credit accounts opened in my name, mailed to Daniel's address, and photos of Sarah's handwritten card copy. My doctor testified my mental health was sound, no signs of decline. The judge reviewed the evidence, his face impassive. The silence was suffocating. Then he spoke. This court finds Mrs. Langley competent. The guardianship petition is dismissed. Restitution of $22,000 is ordered with repayment plans. Fraudulent accounts are canceled. A 1-year restraining order is issued. Relief should have come. But my eyes found Daniel. He stared at the table, rigid, never meeting my gaze. As we left, Ruth squeezed my hand, and Thomas gave a quiet nod. I had won my money, my independence, my dignity. But as I stepped into the Savannah sunlight, a hollow ache told me I had lost something irreplaceable. The next day, I carried the court papers home and set them beside a vase of fresh camellias from my garden. Outside, the bloom swayed in the breeze, as if the world hadn't noticed the fracture in my life. I watered the flower beds, the routine calming my hands, if not my heart. The restraining order protected me, but it couldn't fill the void. I had dreamed of Sunday dinners with Daniel, Sarah, maybe grandchildren. Now silence filled the house. I cooked for one, set a single plate, and avoided the empty chairs. At night, I sat in the rocker where I once held Daniel as a baby, staring at a silent phone. Independence was mine, but it felt like a lonely cage built from betrayal and loss. Yet, a stubborn spark refused to die. Something whispered that my story wasn't over, that my garden wasn't the only thing that could bloom again. Thomas visited at first to check on the repayment order, ensure the restraining order held, and update me on legal steps. He came with a briefcase, speaking in measured tones, but each visit, he stayed longer. I started brewing coffee before he arrived. Soon, we talked beyond legalities about my garden, Jane's, my years at St. Joseph's. He shared stories of his late wife, gone 6 years, and his children living far away. We found a shared love of literature, him for biographies, me for mysteries, and swapped book suggestions like old friends. One evening, over peach cobbler on the porch, Thomas gestured to the live oaks draped in Spanish moss. Savannah survived floods, wars, storms, he said. It's built on resilience. His words stirred something in me. Resilience was in me, too. The house, once stifled by silence, grew warm again. Laughter returned, not the laughter I'd imagined with Daniel, but laughter nonetheless. Thomas never saw me as a burden, never hinted I owed him. He valued me, and that was a gift I hadn't known in years. Slowly, I trusted him not as my lawyer, but as a man who saw me for more than my mistakes or money. In that trust, hope flickered, fragile but real. The months passed like a gentle tide, smoothing the scars of the storm. Thomas's visits became about stories, not files. Ruth teased us about our obvious connection. By spring, the choice felt inevitable, like the world had been guiding me toward it. We married on a warm May afternoon under my backyard oaks. Ruth stood as my witness, smiling proudly, while Thomas's sister came from Augusta. Birds sang instead of music. I wore a simple lavender dress, and my garden's camellias and azaleas bloomed as if celebrating. As we vowed, the weight of the past eased. I'd lost $34,000, not just money, but trust and my son to his greed. That pain would linger, but it no longer defined me. What remained was my dignity, hard-won, and a love that asked only for my presence. Our home filled with laughter, books piled on tables, and evenings in the garden with coffee as the sun set. It wasn't the life I planned, but it was mine, and it was enough. Sometimes you lose everything to find what truly matters. If you were me, would you hold on to a family that betrayed you, or choose to live on your own terms?